Okay, so welcome back. Thank you, and welcome to the team. We are now working on item 10, which is public spaces and ground leases and rental charges. So you've undertaken a review and you've got some changes and some recommendations there. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll largely take the report as read, but I will run through a quick summary of the rationale. So under the current regime, we aren't charging the rates at what council has set. It's just been at a flat rate incorporating the rental charge. This report proposes that we charge the services or what any entity will charge for those services at the amount they're set during that annual year. One of the big drivers for this is that in the instance that the Three Waters reforms goes ahead and that entity seeks to charge the full amount for those services, council will be at a shortfall in funding as this will be going to the new entity. This rental review will see an increase in charges to people that have leases currently. In the interest of trying to keep that increase to a minimum, we've reduced the rental component of that of the charge.
Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just note in 4.17 that we were awaiting feedback from Napier City Council on whether or not this regime
Thank you. Have we
complements
heard
their own.
from Napier City?
We didn't end up hearing anything back from Napier City, but yeah, as the report says, we did hear from Palmerston North City Council, and they're doing something very similar to us and what we're proposing.
Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Jeff, I'm really aware that sporting clubs and cultural groups and community groups are under severe financial pressure at the moment. Has any consultation been carried out with any of those groups in regards to the increase in charges?
There's not been any prior, but before we'd make any sort of changes to their lease, we would make them aware that these changes would be incoming.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you. I've just got a query about, I suppose what I really want is an example. So I just note that for small buildings, for community youth and early childhood groups, so the existing annual rental at the moment, $655, that's going to go up to $1,169. Have I got that right? Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
It's a substantial kind of increase. I know it still doesn't seem a lot, but I just wonder if you've got an example of a particular, place that would go up to that amount, because it's, almost double.
I believe Colin's got a spreadsheet of the existing leases that we are aware of.
Through you, Your Worship. I guess what we're putting forward to you, cutting to the chase, is that under Three Waters, what we're currently charging users of stormwater, water and sewer services, currently in the sense parks, the price that will go to paying for those services at the moment, we're not recovering from the users. So this change is saying this is what the standard council charges are, like any other ratepayer at the moment in your residential fees, etc., are charging those uniform annual rates, and we're suggesting that under a new regime we should be charging the same. That amount needs to be recovered on the same basis, because a Three Waters entity, we would be advised, will be looking for exactly that amount of money. In terms of realistically, the biggest change is not the rental for the land. In fact, we're suggesting making that lower and rationalising it. The biggest change will be it's those Three Waters charges that currently are in place for other users, and we're saying that some of those places that may not have had a rise and they haven't been changed in 3-4 years, it is a significant increase. We're also saying in the report that we will bring it in at the anniversary of their 3-year reviews, which is answering Councillor Dixon's request. There will be a consultation, a talk with them saying this is coming and to be aware.
Okay, thanks, that's good.
Okay, that's good, answering that question. Thank you. Councillor Corbyn?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is, how long have we not been recovering the cost of the three waters in the rental? Is it just 4 years?
Yes.
So there was
last review.
there's an opportunity 3 years ago to do what we're doing now?
Yeah, and I guess maybe to more fully answer your question, we are recommending here that those annual charges will change each year as per any other rate demand for any other user, and this will stop these big lurches.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, direction on this paper, please. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Kerr? Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Any further questions or comments, councillors? I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that is carried. Thank you very much, Jeff and Colin. Councillors, now that we've heard all the submissions for the Whakatū stormwater, we will go back to item 8, and this is the targeted rate and schedule of fees. Welcome to, Brett. You'll handle it? Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So, what we have seen, I'll ask you, Chief Executive, just to take you through. You've been through to the engagement evenings. We've read the submissions. We haven't got full support from the community, and we need to look at how we do this and make sure that we have the accurate fees and charges and that people know that they're going to pay. And how could we do that? Just one question I'd like to ask, though, probably the engineering team. When we do a project around $6 to $8 million, do we undertake the detailed design ourselves, or does that go together in the project? Do we pay for that to get a project underway normally?
That's one of the fundamental considerations now. So we're going to deal with paper, Your Worship. Two aspects. We went out and consulted on a set of fees and charges associated with the functions of the Resource Management Act. We got no feedback on the fees and the schedule of fees and charges. So that's one decision, and obviously Whakatū stormwater is, as you say, goes back to the county council days. We had stage 1, which we had a targeted rate and has fully been paid for. The question that we've been working with the Whakatū landowners on is what does the second stage of a stormwater solution look like? We've had very good engagement, but not a universal view from the landowners. Clearly, there's still 40 hectares of industrial land to enable the development of in Whakatū. I think that whilst it hasn't been all of the landowners, there's a clear preference for an investment in a stormwater pump that negates the need to use lots of land as a stormwater detention area. The issue that's arisen is on a preliminary design, we've got a cost range of $6 to $8 million, and the feedback from some themes of feedback, but one of the strong bits of feedback is we'd like more certainty on what the actual cost will be, before you make a decision on a targeted rate. We also clearly had feedback that they believe that there's a strong council should be considering a public good contribution here for all the things that have happened in Whakatū since stage 1 in 2006-07. We know that we've got big Transpower substations there. We know that recently we built Te Ara Kahikatea. So the key consideration for council is we're not asking you to adopt a targeted rate today. We're not in a position to do that. In order for this to progress and to get to a greater level of certainty around the cost, we need to move from preliminary design to detailed design. The costs associated with that are in the order of $400,000. the question for council is, do we invest that $400,000 to get to the space where we've got better information on which we can then talk further and make a decision subsequently on what a targeted rate would look like, and we've got the budget to do that work. The question then also is, if you kind of think about, you know, at the moment the total cost range is $8 million. If we invested $400,000, one of the considerations is whether council does that as our contribution to the work. That would be circa 5% public good. But the fundamental question is, with the feedback, we're not in a position for you to make decisions on a targeted rate around, you know, the stormwater solution for Whakatū. But clearly, to move this forward, we need to do, to move it forward, we need to do the detailed design work, and that's at a cost of circa $400,000. That is the, I think, the what council needs to consider.
So that is what I'd like to focus now, is whether or not that we consider that public good. And I'll start with Councillor Nixon.
We standing? Sorry, couldn't remember. Just a simple question, because this, as I read it, is very much to facilitate industrial development. And Liz, I think, is from the residential part of Whakatū. What is likely to be the increase in rates for a typical residential property in Whakatū? I imagine land values are similar across the board. Do we know that? Because it might influence how I make a final decision.
Point of clarification, Liz is not residential.
No.
Liz is in the industrial area.
Okay, that's useful, but nevertheless, will it, I'll change the question, will it cover the residential area of Whakatū? And if so, what is like, it won't? Okay, that's what I thought. That's great. I misunderstood where she came from.
Yeah, thank you. I get the $8 million, but I'm still trying to get an understanding of what that could be for each of the ratepayers, you know, what they're likely to stump up, just based on some of the submissions that have come in saying, hey, one of them, for example, is Bill Niman, who is, in my regard, quite far away from it. So he's saying, why should I be involved?
Yeah, and so this becomes the so in effect the scheme works on it captures a number of properties, and you pay on the percentage of the land holdings you hold within the defined scheme. I don't think we'll end up in a space of 100% universal agreement from all the different landholders in Whakatū. A number of properties have developed since Scheme 1 in 2007 by dealing with their stormwater on site as part of their development. So I think that some of the future engagement, and ultimately for consideration for council, when we've got more certainty around the costs, is how those costs might fall between the different landowners. And we're aware of, through the engagement process, some of the landowners that are quite keen to get their I'm thinking particularly the low-lying land owned by the Low Corporation, some of the owners in Johnston Way that might be open to differential rates. But I think until we get to a space of more certainty on those what those actual costs are, it's going to be very difficult to move this forward.
So it's not an opt-in targeted rate, though, is it? No. So there are still people that are up against and saying, we don't want to pay, we're not going to pay type of approach.
Yeah.
So what recourse or what do we have in place, or will we have in place to mitigate that?
Yes, so ultimately where council will need to end up, and it's not today obviously, is to, if anything's going to progress here, adopt a targeted rate for the scheme and the properties. And these are we're not talking like a targeted rate of, $1,000 a year. Some of this is tens of thousands of dollars that the landowners will be up for as a targeted rate. And those are some of the things that we're going to need to work through. But as part of the historical context here, we inherited a lot of this from the county council. There was no scheme or structure plans in place for how Whakatū would develop. We had the initial work, stage one, many decades ago, that's been done. I think some of the councillors that have been around for more than this triennium will know, because we've had Mr. Lowe and as representative, Mr. Hogarth, in the council chamber saying, councils didn't follow through on the second stage of the scheme, and that's been the basis of all the work that we've done. So all I can reiterate is, this isn't a straightforward, a straightforward proposition. We've had good engagement with the landowners. It's not universal. I think a strong theme is we want a solution that doesn't sacrifice a lot of land for stormwater detention. How all of that's going to fall when we get to, is it a straight percentage of the land holding? Is there a different way to cut this? Is still in front of us. But I think there's a fundamental question here around one of the strong themes is wanting more certainty around what that cost will be, because at the moment we're saying, I think as it says in the paper, in the range of 6 to 8 million.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm really interested in the Transpower electrical site and its potential vulnerability, having seen what happened at Redcliffe. If we lose such a asset because of flooding, the impact can be vast. I'm wondering if conversations have been had with Transpower and if we can lean on them to help contribute to what would be an answer that resolves, I'm thinking, a worry of them and not just our ratepayers.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship.
So that was answered the question this morning through the submissions. So Transpower have been included in the engagement. Brent?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, look, I've had a number of discussions with Transpower. They recognise that their land drains within the scheme, and they were. My first discussions with them was about whether they would give up some land for stormwater detention, and they actually put forward the idea of perhaps contributing through the targeted rate, because there was some benefit to their land by having an improved stormwater scheme there. So the information has been submitted to them, and we're waiting to have a further conversation with them. Perhaps like a lot of these departments, there are a range of people that you actually have to talk to. So in terms of finding out who's the decision maker, we're still working through that process, but they have all of the information about the scheme, what we're proposing and what their potential costs are. They're not insignificant, and they would certainly have a benefit to the rest of the scheme in terms of absorbing some of those costs. So we're still in that negotiation process.
Thank you.
Your Worship, thank you for that, Mr. Chapman. I'm really interested in whether they would contribute towards the design cost, the potential 400K. So that would be good if that could be picked up too.
Councillor Barrow?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think, for me, as a comment, I think as a public good, I could see this 400,000 bringing certainty, and council's role as enabling further development there would make sense to me.
Thank you. So Councillor Barrow, I'll just take Councillor Corbyn and then we'll look at suggested pathway forward that you've just suggested. Councillor Corbyn?
Thank you, Your Worship. Most of these submissions are either we support it or we don't want to pay for it, and then the public good element. But Phil Hogarth's submission had a number of conditions attached to it. Have the officers considered those points, and what are their comments on them if they are in a position to make a comment on them?
Thank you, Your Worship. I suppose the conditions put forward by Lowe's are being considered, and I suppose everything is still reasonably fluid in the way that we're progressing with it. The progression that we've made is essentially to try and encourage the ratepayers to come on board to garner their support for how many are for the scheme and those that are against, and then seeing how we're moving forward. The majority of the land is owned by Lowe's, and they have a significant cost that would be placed on them, close to probably about $1 million for their contribution. So they're always quite keen to have the upper hand and understand what's going on. They need a pump station really to develop their land, so that is why they keep pushing for that, and he has his, I suppose, their conditions around that. But yeah, mainly because they're one of the larger players, they're keen to know what's going on and trying to control things, I suppose. But does that help answer your question?
Yes.
I think it does for now.
Yeah, but so essentially the proposal that Lowe's have put forward is being considered. I can't say whether we will go with all their suggestions or not, but it's in a developing phase.
Thank you. Councillor Sholin?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, I mean, there's been some discussion around potential public good and the detailed design, and that being around 400K. Interested to understand where the funding for that comes from, if the council is of a mind to treat that as public good, especially given our current context.
Thank you, Mr Allen. $400,000 come from if council was of a mind to...
Orders budget, Mr Chair.
Oh, Mr Chapman.
Effectively, it come from, like, stormwater is funded through the general rate. That's the funding tool that we have.
Right.
We generally borrow for large infrastructure upgrades of this nature, and the design phase is an element of the total cost of the project. So.
Yes, certainly.
Sorry, just for a little bit more detail. So are we talking about this being something that is done as part of a future annual plan, as part of the LTP? I'm just trying to understand, because I'm trying not to look at spending in individual context at the moment. I'm trying to wrap it together given how much our district is dealing with in the coming years.
Through your worship, what you're undertaking here is the development costs, or the design costs, only. From that will flow the capital investment that will require to be repaid through a targeted rate. And you're right, in our current context, following Cyclone Gabriel and the other growth constraints that we have as an organisation and community, you will need to take into account the cost of this infrastructure upgrade alongside everything else that the organisation, that the council is having to meet.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and this is all becomes priorities and trade-offs through you, Your Worship. I mean, we know, this council knows that, in terms of being the economic powerhouse of Hawke's Bay, that largely comes through the role that we play in terms of our industrial areas. A lot of conversations, as the council knows, where we're trying to, in terms of the future, look at where the next lot of industrial development comes from. We know Whakatū, has still 40 hectares of industrial land to be enabled, and that finding the appropriate stormwater solution, is key to that in terms of the trade-offs between, this is the non-engineer chief executive speaking, so correct me if I get this wrong, guys, is, a large pump that might not, be used in anger on a regular basis versus the trade-offs of basically a whole lot of land that would need to be provisioned for stormwater detention. But the judgments for council is around fundamentally, I'm not advocating for this one way or the other, but if we think about the history of this, in terms of Whakatū, we've had development happen, but in order for this to progress and find a solution, to the remaining development of land in Whakatū, we're at a point for this to move forward from the work that we've done is going to is going to require some detailed design work to be done. So it's either we keep moving this forward, or it stops. It stops at this point and gets revisited again, like it has been periodically, some time in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
Unlike the Chief Executive, I am going to advocate because I can. I think it's a really sound thing to do to unlock that land and utilise our wet or our trade waste pipeline to its capacity if we can. Therefore, I do think council should continue with whatever the next stage is, and it seems like the design is the next stage, detailed design. I would like to add a line at the bottom that says we consider capitalising that design work cost at an appropriate time, so that if the project does go ahead and there is a rating scheme set up, I'd like to think that it was going to be based on those that get the greatest benefit pay more than those that get lesser benefit, and that the 400,000 can be added to that capitalised cost. And happy to move that if and when you're ready, Your Worship.
Second.
But then, yeah.
So just I'd like the team actually to work out, to understand, is that possible to be able to do that?
So just to clarify this, Bruce, I have a go, correct me. So we're basically saying we would commit the money from council to doing the detailed design, yeah, but we would leave open until we're striking a targeted rate as to whether the $400,000 is a public good contribution or is included in the targeted rate proposal at the appropriate time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can give some context.
So we'll just see if we can draw that up, and we have a mover and a second to that. Anybody want to speak to the motion? Okay, cool. Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment. I just, the Whakatū is our biggest opportunity actually, and for us to be able to think about, public good and activating an area of 40 hectares for industrial expansion, I consider that as public good. And while I would be happy to capitalise and look at that forward, actually, we need to get the detailed design is going to enable everybody to understand the full cost of this. And so without that, we're kind of running blind here. So I just think that we need to get on and get the detailed design done. If it can be capitalised, well and good. But I'm not going to. I think that we need to really carefully consider what does public good look like for us, for our industrial expansion. Councillor Kerr, the right to reply?
Yeah, Your Worship, the sense of capitalising, if needed, is actually around, rather than having a debate now and saying the 400 is public good, we may have a debate afterwards that says actually the public good is 10% the value of the whole project. So I'm trying not to lock in today that the public good element is just that we believe in this project sufficiently to invest in the design details, and the public good element discussion can come later, and it may be capitalising, it may not be. So that's probably more broadly what I'd like captured in the recommendations. It may be just as simple as public good element discussion and decisions are deferred or delayed.
So I think that, Bruce, have you got any thoughts on that?
I think, through Your Worship, the concept of capitalising the cost, and generally the design cost of a significant project like this would be capitalised into the eventual asset anyway, so it's just how you work your way through it. the key consideration is not whether that's capitalised or not, because that's sort of an accounting treatment. That the accountants get more excited over than the engineers. But one of the things we do need to be really clear about, and we don't necessarily need to have that 100% defined now, is how it's paid for. And I think that's to your point, Councillor, around we can have those more definitive public good, private good conversations close to the time once we've done the detailed design work and we understand what the product is that we're going to be recommending.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I've just got another couple of comments, or Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, we are going to need more industrial land sometime in the near future, and this is ideal land. And to have it locked up by either objectors to the scheme or council inaction, I think is just wrong. We need to be supporting this because it will be cheaper for us in the long run, I think, to spend the 400,000 as a means of gaining some future expansion opportunities. Plus, it has the right wastewater design around it, which is another advantage. Unfortunately, unfortunately, a lot of industries that didn't need to be there went there because the development contributions back 15 years ago were so low. That's why they went there. And this won't correct it, but it will release a significant piece of land which will give us some future expansion for the sort of industries that should be there.
You know, well said, Councillor Nixon. So if you look at D, are you comfortable with that direction of the motion? So it's just added, which is, you know, this will be considered at a future date, whether or not, how we manage that future design fee. Okay. Any further comments? Everyone's quite clear on those recommendations? We have a seconder, we have a mover, Councillor Kerr. You comfortable with the recommendations? You want to write a reply? Okay, thank you. No further comments? Seconder comfortable? All right, I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Well done, team. Very excellent debate. Right, moving on now to item 11, parking controls. Is John Payne here with us today? I'm not sure if he is. Oh, you're John Payne? Oh, you're many hats today, Mr. Cameron. Very good. Okay, so we're looking at the changes to these areas. This is to help the Heretaunga Women's Centre manage all of their car parking.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
We've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Kerr moves, Councillor Sholem. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? No. That's carried. Thank you. Item 12, which is the Hastings Napier Future Development Strategy Joint Committee appointments, changing from Deputy Mayor Councillor Kerr to Councillor Arlene Lawson, Chair of Strategy and Policy. Any comments? Happy to move from the Chair. Has seconded. Thank you, Councillor Heke. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on now to item 13, which is the request from the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, LGOIMAs. Councillor Butto has moved those recommendations. Councillor Nixon has seconded. Any comments or questions? I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That is carried. Item 14. So proposed amendments to meeting of the schedules of meetings. Councillor Sholem has moved the recommendation. Councillor Apatu has seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That is carried. Item 17 is moving to the public excluded part of today's meeting. And can I thank our community who may have been joining us today. Thank you for coming to visit our council chamber virtually. Great to have you here. And now we go out of live streaming and we move into a public excluded part. I'll just ask Mr. Cameron why this paper would be in a PX part of our agenda today?
As through Madam Chair, it's recommended for public excluded, the paper discusses personal information of nominees.
Personal information. Thank you very much. And Heidi Rā, thank you very much, Caitlin. We're now moving out of into. So I have a mover